What is going on, guys? Welcome back. This is episode number 10 in this series. If this is your first time seeing a video on my channel or from this series, you should definitely go back and check out the other videos. I will leave a link to the full playlist in the description, but otherwise, let's build this inventory. So this is actually what we built for this video, and you guys already know because of the title, but this is what it looks like here. So we've got this nice scrolling div here, so when you open up your inventory, you can see all of your items and scroll through them. And right now they're all the same thing because I just used those as placeholder, but it's going to be super cool once it's all working and we can see all of our items in here. So before I get started with this video, I just wanted to say thank you so much, guys, for your awesome comments and all your likes and the subscriptions that I got. So I ended up making a post on Reddit yesterday about this series and it really blew up, and thank you to all of you that upvoted it. I had like 130 upvotes on it before it got taken down, and it got taken down because they said that I was self-promoting too much, which I totally understand, but that wasn't my intention. I mean, I was only posting about the video because I really want people to watch it because I feel like there's a lot to learn from it. And not only that, but it also really helps me out when you guys give me suggestions and feedback on the stuff that I'm working on. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the support. All right, and then just one more thing before we get started with building this inventory. I just wanted to answer a question that I had about how I'm actually looping in our game, because on the last one we were building a loading bar, and in the loading bar we actually were calling a loop function here, but you guys didn't actually know where I was calling this loop from. So I actually have a separate window where it's just the general JS page, and this actually handles the actual app and loop stuff that we have going on. So this is really all the code that we have going on for the loop. We just have this one function that's calling our game loop, and then all it's doing is it's calling our request animation frame, which is defined right here as our request animation frame. So what happens is when the game loads, we call this, it calls to loop, and then the loop calls this, and then once this calls, then it's just going to call it forever and ever and ever, over and over again. But in any case, let's get started with building this inventory. Alright guys, so here we are at the beginning of this video, and as you can see, we don't have anything set up on our inventory yet, so that is what we're going to be starting right now. So the first thing I want to do is just go over the Illustrator file that we have set up right now. So I worked on this design over the past couple days, actually just I think yesterday and then today I worked on it. And I think it's looking pretty cool. I'm trying to incorporate all the functionality that I had in the main site. So this was the original inventory on the old site, and I really spent not that much time, but a good amount of time getting all these cool loading effects and stuff. So when you refresh the page, it'll load the inventory and then show all your items fade in. And I really like that effect, but since we're moving the inventory to a separate window, I'm just trying to come up with, something that looks a little bit closer to what the rest of our UI is looking like. And let me know what you guys think below about this new design, whether you like it or not. All right, so let's get started building this cool inventory. So let's jump over to our HTML page. And let's find that button real quick, because we already set up the chat. If you see on the old or the new site, we already have the chat set up here, and it's going to be a similar style to this, but obviously a little bit different shape, but it's going to be the same idea. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our HTML, and this is where we actually built our chat. So the chat window is defined right here. So what we can do is actually just copy the class or all the classes that we're using for this specifically, and we'll jump up to our inventory and then go ahead and just make a new div and paste in those classes. So the HD option window class in this case has a width and a height of 350, whereas in this case we're probably not going to be doing it that way. So what I'm going to do is I'll probably wait to add that class, but just for the time being, I'll add all of the styles to an ID just for this specific one. So if we look, our naming convention here was to do the HD chat window, so we'll do the HD inventory window. So the inventory window as an ID, and just for now we'll just grab all of these new styles. But yeah, we're gonna stick with that, and we're actually just gonna get rid of the display none and opacity 0 because we actually want to see this thing while we're building it. So we can do that, and then we'll fiddle with the width and height, but I just want to go ahead and add that ID to our element that we just made, and we'll just remove this class for now until we work on that later. So I'm just going to add our HD inventory window class or ID here. And yeah, I forgot about our loading bar, so I'm just going to go ahead and not remove it because I can't remove it easily right now. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump into our game. And right now it's set to 3 seconds, but I'm just going to make it like something super tiny, like 200 milliseconds, and that will load super quick. And obviously we just have to fiddle with the width and height here on this box so that we can get it to look a little more like that, our design. So we'll jump back in here and we'll go ahead and say the width is going to be maybe 300, and then our height, let's give it 400 and see. So that actually looks a lot better. We could even probably go higher on the height, maybe like 450, and then we'll just have to move that back over to center it. So we just change that margin left. And now you'll notice that this box is starting to look pretty close to what we have on our design here. So inside of our HTML where we made our div, I'm just going to go ahead and define 3 new divs. And I'm just going to ID the first one with HD, and then I'll just do an abbreviation for inventory, and then I'll call head. So that'll be the actual header of the inventory, and then we can do a foot just for the footer, and then we'll make our middle inventory, which can be, we'll call it inventory list. So awesome. Now we have our 3 divs actually defined on our HTML. So now what we can do is go ahead and give them styles. So if we jump in here, the first thing we're going to want to do is just do that first one that we made, which was the head. Alright, so I was going to say that these would be, the header and the footer would be positioned absolute, but in this case, what we would do actually, because we're just going to have the list be a scrolling div, so we actually can just have these elements sitting on top of each other, and we don't really need to worry about positioning them absolute. So we'll jump in here to our CSS, and we have our head tag. So we're just going to do a width of 100%, a height of, let's say, 50 pixels, and then we'll just give it a background of red just to see this item actually sitting. And so I had built it before with the position absolute, but now it looks a lot better because it incorporates the padding. And like I said, we don't really need to do position absolute on those items. So what we'll do now is just go ahead and define our foot tag. So in here, we'll say that maybe it wants to be like 40 pixels. And so you'll see that that item's now going to sit right below it. So it's like touching it. But we want to go ahead and add one more in the middle, and in this case we'll just do a calc on the height so that we can do 100% of the height minus the 90 pixels that we're taking up for the header and the footer. And so there we go. Now we've got our full piece of red, and obviously they're all the same color, so it just looks like one block, but they are separated now. So what we can do is go ahead and just remove those backgrounds because we know everything is working the way it's supposed to. So now what we want to do from our design is just add a title here, and then this is actually going to be the number of items that are in that specific category. So in that case, like 102 items you have in your inventory. So we're just going to jump back into our HTML page, and on the head page we're just going to define, in this case we could just define like an H3 tag and put our or our all items -102 in here, and then just add an image tag here, and then let's just grab for our source, we want our images, icons, and in this case I don't know that I have that icon saved out yet, so we will just use a check icon. And so now if we jump back in here, you'll see that that stuff will appear, and that check takes up the whole thing again. So what we want to do is just go ahead and give this a couple of styles. So our HD inventory head, we want to jump in and we want to style the H3 that's inside of that and the image. So we'll do the HD inventory head. We'll give this font size of like 18 pixels maybe, and then just a float left. And then we just float it so that we can go ahead and actually grab the image too that's inside of here and just float that right, so that it sits nicely next to it. And then we'll go ahead and get rid of that font size, and we'll replace it with, let's say, a width of maybe 25 pixels. And now you'll see that that's actually getting a lot closer to what we're looking for. So a few things that we still want to do obviously is add that border, and then go ahead and just adjust this so it's not so close to the top, and we want to change the font color also. So let's go and make that border first. So if we just grab the actual head, it's pretty easy just to add our border, in this case border bottom of a 1 pixel solid, and then I think I used just an RGBA of white with 2 opacity, I believe. So that looks pretty good there. And actually, I'm trying to think that might be a little bit too high for what we're looking for. So I think we could actually probably bump down that height on that actual div a little more. So if we say maybe the height is 40, and then of course just fixing our 90 to be 80 right here. So let's just check that out. And I think that's actually plenty of room for what we're looking for. So what we can do now is just get that text to sit a little bit nicer on the bottom. And I'm probably just going to end up using, well, you can use either like a margin top on these guys, or you can just add a padding to the actual box itself. In this case, I'm just going to add a padding, let's do a padding top of 10 pixels, and then of course add our box sizing just so it doesn't push it out. And now you'll see that's starting to look a lot better, and I'm just going to go ahead and increase that font size. So I just went in and I adjusted a couple of things. I just adjusted the color here, I made the font size a little bigger, and then I also just shrunk this image down a little bit. But I'm noticing that the padding on this side doesn't look very good, so I'm going to actually increase the overall padding on the left and right of the container. So if we look at the actual inventory window, you'll see it has a padding all around of 10 pixels. What we could do in this case, I mean, we could just make the whole thing 15, and then you'll see that that's actually starting to look a lot cleaner here. So it gives it some nice space around the edges, and then it's kind of sitting far from the top. All right, so I fiddled around with the heights and the paddings and stuff on this, and I think this is actually looking pretty good. So if we take a look at our Illustrator file, it's starting to look pretty close to what we were looking for. I mean, there's a couple of adjustments that can be made, but all in all, I think it's pretty good for this video. So now let's just go ahead and jump into that footer. So the footer is also pretty easy. I mean, in this case, instead of text with an image floated next to it, it'll just be text with text floated too. So in this case, we will go ahead and jump into our HTML file, and then inside of our footer now, we just want to define a couple of tags, and we'll just say that these are like p tags under here. And so in this case, we'll write our order by, and then we'll make another p tag under that and just put our recent, rarity, and then our ABC for alphabetical. And so now we can go ahead and just actually define a font size inside of our foot tag, and we'll give the font size maybe like 14 pixels. And then we can go ahead and do our HD inventory foot, and we'll do the nth of type selector here. And this should actually be on the P tag inside of the footer. And we'll go ahead and just give that a float left. And then if we duplicate this and just do our second child, we can do a float right. And let's see what this looks like. So you'll see that it looks pretty much perfect, besides the fact that it's like really high up, and the reason being just because our footer has such a large height. So what we can do is go ahead and just adjust that a little bit. So if the font size is only 14 pixels and we have a 20 pixel height, that might be good for what we're looking for. And then we could just add a nice padding top on this to push it down a little bit of like 6 pixels. And then give this our box sizing, and then go ahead and just copy the border that we're using here, but obviously we're going to be doing a border top in this case. Alright, so awesome. I just fiddled around with our values a little bit more, and I think this is looking pretty close to our Illustrator design here. So what I'll do is just go ahead and let's get started on these actual items. So in this case, it's going to be pretty straightforward. What we want is we want a div to go around the entire piece, and then we'll just have two divs floated next to each other inside of each of those. One for the actual icon here, and then we just have our text floated next to it. So let's go ahead and jump inside of our HTML file, and just inside of our list now, we're going to give ourselves some space here, and we're just going to define a bunch of divs that will define our actual item in our inventory. So in this case, we'll just give these guys classes, and we'll go ahead and define this as inventory item for our actual wrapping div. And then what we can do is inside of that, there'll be two main divs that will do class of HD inventory icon, and then we could just do text. So this is our very basic structure that we've got going on right now. And then obviously inside of our icon, if we take a look here, pretty much it's just, I mean, we don't need to do much more than make that and then add the image inside of it, because we can add the border and the background to that one div we just added. And then for this guy, pretty much the same thing. We'll probably just, one piece of text inside of here that we can fill with the appropriate information. So if we just want to finish that up real quick, we can just go ahead and actually add our image tag here and then just do our source and find our helm image in our icons. And then what we can do is go ahead and just open up our text, and we can add, let's say, like an H4 in here. And we can go ahead and just type in the text that we've got going on here. So first we've got our helm text, and then we can break that, and we can add our other text here. So obviously we're going to need some spans and stuff in order to, color them differently, but that's going to all be in script later on, because obviously each one of these items has different information that needs to go over here. So we're always going to be changing up exactly what we need to be in here. But let's jump over and actually start styling this guy. So in this case we have our HD inventory item. So we're going to define our HD inventory item. And in this case we're going to be giving it a width of 100% and then probably like a height of maybe 30 pixels. I'm not quite sure yet, because we'll probably just add margins and stuff to them, but that even might be too big. But let's give it a shot. So let's give this a background of, let's say white, and see how that looks on the screen. So you'll see obviously we have our giant image again and our text is sitting here, but we got our white bar, and it's looking like I actually thought it was going to be too big, but it looks like it's actually going to be much too small. So we're probably going to jump up to maybe 50 pixels might be good for the height. So yeah, 50 pixels might end up being good. I mean, we're always going to adjust those values later. So let's just keep moving on. So the next thing we want to do is just grab this icon now. So the HD inventory icon, in this case, we want to give this a width of, well, we want to make it a square, so we would give it a width of the same amount as the height of the whole thing. So in this case 50 pixels, and then the height would also be 50 pixels. Or in this case just do 100% so you don't have to change that value every time. And now we're going to go ahead and get rid of this background white here, and we'll actually just give this icon our border that we're working with. So we know the border, we're going to give it a 1 pixel, well, it's probably going to be larger, actually probably like 3 pixels solid, and then we'll just paste in that red color that we're using. And now if we take a look, it's starting to get a lot better now. So we've got that image actually sitting inside that box, and it's getting closer. But we want to go ahead and do a couple more things here. So we're going to give this a border radius of, let's say, maybe 10 pixels. And then we want to go give the entire listing a padding here as well on the top and the bottom. So in this case we can do a 10 pixel and a 0 on the left and right. And then real quick, let's just define that HD inventory text with a width of, let's do our calc of 100% minus the 50 pixels for the actual icon. And then we can do the height is 100% again. And then what we need to do is go ahead and float both of these left so that they sit next to each other. So now if we take a look, we're starting to get a lot closer to what we're looking for. So we've got a nice margin here. I didn't put enough of a border radius, and we need to fix that image. So let's do that real quick as well. So we'll go ahead and jump inside of that HD inventory icon, and then we'll get the image, and then we'll go ahead and give that a width of, let's say, 60%, just guessing. So the width is looking pretty good on the image. I think it's probably about the right size. Maybe it's a little bit too big, I'm not sure. But what we'll do is go ahead and center it now. So if we want to center it, I mean, we could just do a margin left of 20% and a margin top of 20%, since we're dealing with just the 60% width. So that'll actually center that image nicely for us in the middle. And then just to add a couple of nice effects to this, we'll go ahead and copy our filter drop shadow and put it on that image, and as well as jump into here and on that actual icon, just give this a class of shade in out so we can see that nice box shadow show up on those. And now you'll see with those drop shadows, it's actually starting to look really good. So now obviously we have to clean up this text a little bit, because what we want is, we obviously want a little bit of margin here in between the icon and the text, but we also want this text to be centered in the middle of the icon so that it doesn't sit at the top. And since we jump inside of our Illustrator file and see that some of our items actually have only one line and some of them have two lines, but we always want them to be centered. So the trick is, Generally what I use is actually if you put these all inside of one line, inside of one block of text like we're doing right here, you can actually use a transform translate. And if you guys have other suggestions about this, definitely leave them below, because sometimes I always have problems centering things vertically because I want to do it so often. But sometimes there's not a lot of easy ways to do it. But if you guys have suggestions or other ideas about this, definitely leave it down below. But what I'm going to do for this is actually grab this HD tag in our styles. And so if we just give this H4 now, let's just give it, first of all, a padding of left of 10 pixels and then our box sizing. So what we're going to do to actually center this vertically is we're going to first make this thing positioned relative so that we can give it a top position of 50%. So what that's going to do is push it down halfway, but it's not centered yet because obviously the text takes up its own space. So what we would do is we want to transform and then just translate this thing on the Y back negative 50%. So now we should see when we refresh that this text is actually centered. So you'll see that this is looking really good now. It's nicely centered in the middle, and what that does is it'll make it so that no matter how many lines of text there are here, it'll always be centered from the top and the bottom. So what I'm going to do now real quick is just run through and change up the colors a little bit and add a bunch more items and get this looking a lot nicer. And then what we'll do is go through our actual scrolling this div and using our plugin like we did for the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. All right, so awesome. I was just messing around with adding some new colors to our stuff here, and I added a little bit background color to our icon. Obviously, we need to add some margins now to these items. So what we can do pretty simply is, because we don't want the bottom item, the last item in the list, to have a margin, just because obviously there's nothing under it, so we don't want it to have like an extra bit of padding there. We can use our selector that we've used a bunch of times now. If we jump inside of our actual item, we can do our HD inventory item, and then what we can do is just not select our first child. Or sorry, in this case we would not select our last child. So the last child in the list would not have this margin, but everyone else would. So we would go ahead and give maybe a margin top of 10 pixels. Or actually, I made a mistake. That was supposed to be margin bottom 10 pixels. So now you'll see we're getting some nice spacing in between there, and that's starting to look really good actually. I think that there's a few things I could clean up, but all in all, I think it's starting to look really awesome. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and just copy a bunch more of those real quick. And so we have a bunch of those in there so we can see our actual scrolling working later on. So we jump inside of this now. Obviously, when we have a ton of items, this is going to go crazy and overflow for us. So if we give our list div an overflow of hidden, that'll hopefully get rid of that overflow there. But now obviously we need to be able to scroll. So what we're gonna do is do what we did with our chat module, and we'll actually jump inside of that just so we can get a reference for it. So inside of our draw function for the chat, we're actually calling the plugin that I have working right now, which is just our custom scroll bar. And I can leave a link to that actual plugin in the description below so you guys can check it out. I actually covered it in my chat video, which I can also post a link to that video if you haven't seen that one either. But we'll just go ahead and copy this line right here because this is really the only line we need to get this working. So if I just put this inside of our ready now, let's just put it here, and then go ahead and just call this on our HD inventory list element. I'm hoping that this will work the way it's supposed to, and there you go. See, it's still amazing how simple it is to set that up and get that working. All right guys, well that is it for this portion of the video, and if you guys want to see a part 2 to this series where we actually start setting up the script, definitely leave comment down below and like the video. And if you guys are enjoying this series, or if this is your first episode and you really liked it, please subscribe to my channel and you won't miss any upcoming content. My face is actually on the screen right here, so if you guys click on that and subscribe to my channel, you won't miss a single thing. So I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.